Hello, crazy people, and welcome to my very first philosophical ramblings video, issue 1. And today's issue is actually gonna be quite a tough one already. It goes by the name of Freedom and Determinism, because as a Christian I oftentimes get asked, if there is a God, how can you possibly believe in free will? Because if there is a God, doesn't he predetermine everything? Like, doesn't that mean that he already has seen all your moves, all your thoughts, all your actions? How can there be possibly a free will if a God exists? Now, this is exactly, let me check, this is exactly the question that a scientist asked on a talk with Ravi Zacharias on science and evolution, and I will post you the link in the description. It was in November of 2013, and there is a number of answers that you can give here. The answer that one of the scientists gave that went with Ravi's team was, well, we also can sometimes know what a person does because we know the person so well. If we have a daughter or a relative that is close to us, or even just a best friend, we can sometimes predict their behavior because we know them so well without predetermining what they're doing. We just know what they're gonna do, but we are not the cause of it. And because we're knowing them so well, we're able to tell what they're gonna do. Now, God knows us so well, inside and out, that he knows every move we're gonna make, but he doesn't necessarily have to be the cause of it. That doesn't mean that God never intervenes in anything, but that means that he doesn't determine everything, because foreknowledge, entire foreknowledge, is not the same as determination. Now, I like to elaborate on this argument because when you ask this question, if a God exists, how can there be free will? How is it? The whole issue with, freedom and determination. You have, in order to answer this question, you first have to assume that God actually exists. Because if you don't believe that God actually exists, the question doesn't even come up. The question is, if God exists, how can there be free will? So in order for the question to be relevant and logical, it has to have the existence of God as a premise. That's not to say that it's actually true, but in order for the question to make sense, you have to first assume that God exists. Now, if God exists, it is also true that he's omniscient and omnipresent, which means that he's everywhere at the same time, in past, present, and future. Now, imagine you had a time machine, and you could go, let's say, 1 hour maybe, into the future, and stay there for like 10 minutes and observe someone very closely. Let's say you observe your sister. If you don't have a sister, pick your mother or whatever, and you just sit next to her or him and observe her or him very closely and just examine everything he or she does and write everything down and memorize everything, and then you go back in time. Now you're going to know what this person does in an hour because you've already been there and you have already seen it. But that doesn't mean you are the cause of the action they're gonna take. You have foreknowledge of it, but you don't determine their actions. And I believe that it's the same way with God. That first of all, he knows us so well that he just knows what we're gonna do because he's our creator. And second of all, because he is omniscient and omnipresent, he's basically a living time machine. He is there, present in future, present and past alike. He has already seen what we have done because he's not submitted to the force of time. This is how he can have foreknowledge with everything, about everything, without predetermining anything. Now, of course, as I have said, you can say that the whole question becomes irrelevant if you can't prove that God exists, but this is not today's question. But let me elaborate on this very quickly. I will touch this only briefly because it's a whole nother topic. If God doesn't exist, if he does not actually exist, how can there be free will then? Because the only way we can explain the world, at least right now, without God, is by analyzing physical processes. Physical reductionism or materialism becomes the only possible worldview if you want to explain anything. Now that would mean that we as human beings would not be anything but a product of causality, physical processes, physical effects, physical causes. But if this is true, then free will is an illusion. Because if you pick up a stone and let it fall, the stone has no choice but to fall because he is submitted to the physical force of gravity. It is just a physical process that takes place, and there is no way to change it unless you have a free will. So if God doesn't exist, there is no actual way of explaining why there should be a free will. And it's quite irritating because this is kind of an argument that has been posed against God. We want our freedom back. This is why we have to assume that there is no God. In actuality, science more and more realizes if there is no God, then we lose our freedom because then we are nothing but a product of material processes which are totally determined by the laws of physics. Thank you for watching.